point.
You guys know what dance I was just doing?
I missed it. No.
You guys didn't watch the Baby Bay dance lesson?
No.
No.
Suckers, dude. Really?
I'm not sad I missed that.
Well, anyways, guys, we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Overwatch League Network, your one-stop spot for all things Overwatch and, Overwatch League, esports analysis, all that good stuff. Tonight on episode number 69, we're going to go around the league discussing the latest Overwatch League news, take a look at some roster additions, bring back our fact or fiction segment that we introduced last week, and we'll deep dive into the LA Gladiators versus the Paris Eternal game that happened this past week. All of that and so much more. But before we can do that and introduce you to my co-host, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out with us live tonight on Twitch for our live show. And of course, thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So joining me tonight, as always, are my co-hosts. Up first, we have my soulmate, Slambo. Slambo, how are you doing tonight, brother?
Oh, what's up, nerd? I'm doing good. Apparently, I'm feeling a little froggy tonight. I'm talking about weird stuff before we start this episode, but alas, I'm here. I'm back. I'm ready to talk about week 2 of stage 1. I think that we had a lot of matchups that were really, to me, like ones that I wasn't as excited about that ended up being a lot better. And then a couple that I was really excited about that ended up being quite disappointing. So it was just kind of a different week than last week, but every week of the Overwatch League is going to be different. The storylines are going to unfold. And frankly, I'm just excited to talk about a few of those tonight. So I will shut up and do my Baby Bay dance.
Perfect. I just wish more people were here to see it, or I'll just go back and clip it later, and then we can troll you on that later. But that is besides the point. Also joining us tonight is Spider, and Spider, we got our new Paris video out. You had it ready right when the map dropped, so thank you for that. But how has your past week been?
It's been really good. I mean, like Slambo said, we had a really interesting week in Overwatch League. It was basically like every day was something new. Like teams we thought would win got destroyed. Teams we thought would lose picked up their very first win ever. So it was a fun week. I mean, we have a lot to talk about tonight. There was, drama behind the scenes, players coming in and coming out when they weren't supposed to, all kinds of stuff going on this week. So how about you, man? How was your last week in Overwatch?
Well, I mean, there really hasn't been a week in Overwatch. It's mostly been outside of Overwatch, just watching Overwatch League. But, we got a little bit of news earlier today before the show about, Hero 30, which we're expecting to drop onto PTR tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to that. I really dug the origin story. And what was interesting about this is, we don't really get any, background on what the toolkit is outside of the fact that, we got kind of the backstory of how, this is a damage dealing support who has, the best shot out of, any, healer at this point. So I'm really curious to see how Baptiste is going to be as opposed to Anna, who is also known for having a good shot. I don't know. I cannot wait to dive into the PTR tomorrow and learn more about the new hero. But stage 1, week 2 was pretty solid. We had some pretty high emotions. We also saw a lot of teams fall off with where we expected them to be after what was, the opening week. And there's been some interesting news. We got a couple new roster additions. We got some two-way player contract issues going on, which kind of blindsided us. So we have basically everything and anything kind of in between. So let's go ahead and jump into the news. So to start off, it's been a week for Boston. There's been a couple of reports out. And it seems like Kraft is involved in a different kind of ring.
Seems
so,
like.
So there is going, that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What? Now, one of the things, I know there was a recent update to this, and I was just really? So he's going in here, he's a millionaire, and he's dropping $100. And I couldn't help but laugh at that. But basically, what's going on is the Boston Uprising owner, Robert Kraft, has been charged with soliciting a prostitute in Florida. Now, these charges against Kraft aren't felonies, and they are misdemeanors. So, there wasn't any sort of immediate arrest. And if convicted, it will likely conflict with the Overwatch League's code of conduct. Now, obviously, we don't need to go into all of the details, all that stuff is out there. But, Sambo, you and I were, kind of debating, whether or not we were going to talk about this on the show. So, let's say, the charges go through and Kraft gets arrested. What do you feel like would kind of be the outlier from all of this? Would you expect that, maybe he would have to step down from the team ownership? Would someone else have to take over in that case?
I'm going to answer that question right away and say that if they do view this as a code of conduct violation, and I believe they will, certainly some kind of punishment or some kind of suspension will be in order. I don't know if it's an all right step down. I think that is actually in the realm of possibility. I don't know why I'm not lying there. It's just, just guessing, just like we all are. But I certainly know that some form of punishment will have to come of it. Otherwise, it just really won't sit well with a lot of fans. I don't think a lot of people will not take it lightly that nothing happens. Again, I guess depending on what happens, it might be viewed as a slap in the wrist versus an actual punishment. So there's a whole nother layer to talk about once that punishment is deemed. But just to kind of go back to something that I selfishly wanted to mention is that I feel like if we were an NFL podcast, we're going to talk about this week because it's a huge story, within that circle. So I think for that token is a reason why I really felt like we should talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So I just wanted to kind of toss that in there as to logic to the discussion. I've really said my piece on what I feel of the Totem's question. And notice Totem also asked me a very pointed question, because what he didn't want me to do was just start going off on tangents about Bob Kraft. But I would like to tell a joke I read on Reddit. Can I tell one? It's not mine.
Go nuts.
Okay. Bob Kraft does have a girlfriend. I think she's in her 40s or 20s, much younger than he is, right? So someone said, wow, when she finds out, he's going to be a Kraft single. All right. You're welcome.
I mean, I knew Boston was struggling this stage, but I didn't know they needed a hand that badly.
Wow. Okay. Spider just comes in and decimates the joke I read off Reddit with an original one. I love it. Well done. Well done.
No, I mean, I think the important question here is he going to show up on the player discipline tracker if they do discipline him? I'd love to see Bob Kraft's name on there just as 2-game suspension. I mean,
no, sorry. I was going to say it's probably more like a stage to season ban or suspension. But anyway, go ahead.
I mean, he wasn't running the ring. That's a Sato offense, apparently, because Blizzard has no level of actual disciplinary control.
Spider, you're on fire, though. You're killing it.
I mean, most of what's been said about this story has already been said, so I had to take a lighter approach to it. The seriousness of this story is he did something he wasn't supposed to, and he will be punished for it accordingly, whether that's through Overwatch, the law, whatever. So that's my piece on it.
I honestly don't have anything to follow up, because whatever I was going to say would not have topped Spider's joke at that point. So let's go ahead and let's move on to a little bit of roster news. So we got, a couple of little bit of movement going on. We got one for the Hangzhou Spark as well as the Florida Mayhem. And this is kind of going back to what was kind of going on behind the scenes in scrims going into the start of season number 2. So for the Hangzhou Spark, they went out and they have picked up X-Fox's DPS player Sassin to add some additional firepower to their roster. So Sassin will make the move over to Flex Tank for the Hangzhou Spark, and he was initially a projectile DPS player. And a lot of these rumors started to circulate last week when there was a picture of him with the Spark on social media. So a lot of people were talking about that. And he had been scrimming with the Spark back in Korea, before the season started. And he's also been duo queuing quite a bit with Gooshway. So with that in mind, do you guys feel like this is going to be a sign that maybe they'll use Assassin with Gooshway to maybe bring in more of the dive type goat setup? Or, is this just maybe trying to find a good partner to just tank with Gooshway just out of the gate? Or is it a little bit of both?
I mean, I think this is a good pickup all around. They need a backup flex tank, and he is a player that can play flex tank. He's a player that can play projectile. And in this meta where you're switching between, goats, 4 DPS, 3 DPS, somebody this flexible is just a good pickup all around. Whether or not you're planning to play him regularly or on specific maps, it is up to debate, because Rhea's been doing really well as Godsby in terms of the off tank role. So I could see him coming in Control, or maybe Route 66 or Numbani, very specific maps and various situations in the future. I don't think he's going to be coming in really quickly outside of maybe one map per match, because one thing the Spark has shown us, and we'll talk about it later, is they're not afraid to switch people in and out of their compositions based on how they deem fit. So overall, I think he's just a good pickup, because any player with that amount of flexibility, it's almost like the Seagull factor, where he can play DPS, he can play tank. It's just a player that you can kind of fit into your team as needed. If someone's sick, you're okay, he can play DPS. If someone's, one of the tanks is sick, he can play tank. So it's just a good pickup all around for the Spark.
Yeah, Totem, I don't know how much you've been following the Scrim Exchange, or whatever the hell everyone's memeing out about it. But apparently this team was getting a little bit of recognition, certainly getting, some, I don't know if it's some rumors, I guess, were flying around that time of success in scrims, because Assassin was on the team and there was a nice pairing with Gooshway. So there's a lot of possible immediate, Bash Brothers synergy that they had together. So, I mean, I don't know. Again, I'm not sure how much weight we want to put into all those rumors, and it's just scrims. And I know there's a lot of different opinions on really what we should, expect from some of that information that we get. However, I just really agree with Spider. I mean, it's a great pickup. It just adds depth to the roster. Certainly has a little bit of a unique approach to playing some of these off tanks, possibly with the DPS experience. So, even though there's multiple players on rosters all across the Overwatch League that all play the same hero, as we've talked about on here before, there's different styles to each hero. So I think that there probably is an opportunity to play a little bit more of an aggressive style comp, as Totem was asking earlier, with Assassin and Gooshway in the lineup on the D.Va and Winston. So, I mean, that's a smart thing just to have on your bench and to keep in your back pocket for when you need it, is different play styles within different heroes. And you find that by building depth in that role in the roster.
Yeah, I do quickly just want to note, though, that at least with the D.Va position, we haven't really seen anyone outside of Rhea stepping in. Now, they do have another flex tank on the roster already in Risa, we have not seen yet. But it is nice, kind of how they're able to check, different tanks altogether. So whether it's going to be the DPS flex, which is normally playing Zarya in the current 3-3 setup, or just taking over as the D.Va or Sombra player in some instances, depending on what team it is. So, you're basically checking off multiple boxes as opposed to just maybe just checking off 2. So you get that extra added depth to that roster, and we'll kind of see how this is going to play out. But, I know Assassin did compete last in Contenders Korea, but this was in Season 2, so he missed Season 3, and when it was with Foxes, that was a team that failed to make the playoffs in their last run. But all in all, it's kind of interesting, how we've kind of gone to the point where, there was all this talk going into the Overwatch League season about where the Spark ranked, and if there was that much talk behind it, why they just didn't have him on the roster kind of going in. So I don't know if there was any sort of visa issue, or he knew he wouldn't be able to make the States, or something like that. But it does, it'll be nice for like Gushue. Maybe like this is going to increase his stock in regards to actually getting to see some more playtime. Whereas like right now, for the most part, he has been kind of playing second fiddle to No Smite for the Hondro Spark. So we'll see whether or not this is going to be a more even split between him and No Smite on that main tank role. And, you know, maybe with Rhea, I will say, like, I was a little nervous for Rhea kind of like going in lately, just due to the fact that, you know, he started off so hot with the self-destructs, and we kind of already seen something like this play out with Poco, where the Poco bombs eventually started to have diminishing returns. And for Rhea's sake, I'm already starting to get to that point where I'm feeling like the setups just haven't been as clean. So I don't know if starting Rhea all the time on the D.Va role is necessarily going to be the best solution for the Spark, at least, you know, in the near future now.
It really depends on Rhea's hero pool. Like you said, we've really only seen Rhea on the D.Va. So as the meta shifts, as we start to see changes come in, possible new heroes, it might be, you know, more appropriate to put Assassin in, just because you're going to need that level of flexibility, because D.Va has been consistent through basically every meta we've seen almost the past 2 years. But seeing how things are trending, she's starting to trend downward, and it seems like Blizzard kind of want to get her out of the meta for a little bit. So specifically, like, D.Va players are going to be in the same spot that Tracer players were in, you know, at the end of last season going into the beginning of this season, where they're going to need to expand. So having someone on Assassin, having someone like Assassin on your team is just going to help you all around, especially if Rhea only really plays the D.Va. So I'm excited to see what Assassin can do for this you know, roster.
Well, this is not the only roster update that we have had here in the past week. And, you know, when it comes to esports, we always talk about, you know, bringing the sauce. And right now, everything is coming up gravy in Florida because they've gone out and picked up Team Envy off-tank McGravy. So this has been, like, someone that I know Ed and I have had really high expectations for. And we've just kind of been like, well, where's McGravy at? Why hasn't he picked? Why hasn't he been picked up? And now, like, he's going to Florida. So, okay, for starters, it's important to note that the Mayhem only have one off-tank on the roster right now, that being Zephyr. And McGravy is coming off of the 2018 contender season on Team Envy, and he played all 3 seasons throughout the year. And the move does bring the Mayhem's player count up to 10. Now, you know, Florida have been kind of a curious case. I know, kind of like going into the season, a lot of us really didn't expect to see Tavik start in pretty much every match. So, like, it's kind of been off-putting for us to, like, kind of really, like, gauge where the team is at, just because we're not getting what we expected going in. But, you know, adding that extra depth, you know, kind of creating, like, that extra bit of competitiveness to compete for a spot is only going to help heighten Zephyr as a player, and it's also going to help push McGravy as well.
I think McGravy is a huge pickup. I mean, I've been a big fan of him for a long time as well, and not to, like, discount Zephyr, but I think he's an upgrade to Zephyr. Like, if he can learn to communicate with the team, as it seems Tavik has, I think he's going to be an upgrade for Zephyr, because even last season, Zephyr never really, like, wowed us. And I don't know if that was just because Zumba was doing so well or anything like that, but you know, every time McGravy was playing on Envy, he was like one of the standout players for that team. So I feel like, you know, we always have that discussion of, does Contenders experience and, you know, what we see in Contenders translate to Overwatch League? And this season, if the start of season 2 has shown us anything, yes, it does. Like, most of the players that have come from Contenders are playing at an Overwatch League level that we expect them to play at. So I am excited to see him integrate into this roster, and this just, like, trends Florida even more upward than we saw previous this week. So like, Bare Hands has to know what he's doing to bring McGravy in.
Yeah, I will just say, like, not only does he have contenders experience, but a wealth of it, from start to finish, played in every, US contender season that possibly he could have. So, and also from what I remember from Totem talking about him, and like full disclosure, Totem kind of is my seed of information for a ton of contenders information. I know McGravy plays a large shot calling role and a lot of a communicatory role within the team. So I certainly feel like that's something that, if nothing else, he doesn't bring to the table by playing a lot. He could maybe show them through scrims and practice a lot more of his communication style or tips and ideas on how to shot call, which I feel like any team right now certainly needs. And if you guys remember, I remember part of like one of the post and pre-shows covered how a lot of the Florida Mayhem roster is learning English. So they do a lot of their shot calling in English. So maybe, again, another resource to bring into the team to help with some of the direction they're trying to take all the players when it comes to communicating and shot calling.
Moving on, there was a little bit, I don't know if I would say controversy, but there was a last-minute change in regards to a player being ineligible to play for Boston Uprising. And after last week, we were, for the most part, hyping up the front line with Fusions kind of leading the charge. And we were all really excited to see his iteration, or just the way that he was going about playing Reinhardt, because he was very aggressive, very in your face. And sure, there were times where he was definitely overextended, but it made for exciting Overwatch to spectate. Now, there was a ruling that kept Fusions from playing against the Shanghai Dragons in week number 2. And we did recently get an official statement from the league regarding player eligibility for two-way players. And I want to preface this by saying that this does not just impact Fusions, but also Elk from the Philadelphia Fusion, who is also going through this. So the league says that in order to preserve the competitive integrity of the 2018 Overwatch Contenders Season 3, and avoid a possible influx of Overwatch League level talent competing in the Contenders ecosystem prior to the 2019 Overwatch League season beginning, on September 19th, the league added a clause to its two-way contract rule stating that two-way players who participated in the then upcoming Season 3 of Contenders 2018 could not play in more than 2 matches during Stage 1 of the 2019 Overwatch League season. Now, what's really weird about this is the fact that we know that in the Overwatch League, you have to submit your roster ahead of the matches. And the league office did not determine Fusions was ineligible until just shortly before Boston's match was set to begin. Because I know Boston had, tweeted out the starting lineup. Fusions was on that lineup. And there was whatever last-minute shuffle, and then it kind of put Boston Uprising in a bind. And, what we're going to talk about after this story is definitely this had something to do with it, just because, probably could have played out differently had they had Fusions in. But what this means is that the ruling is basically going to say, hey, Fusions cannot play the rest of Stage 1. Same with Elk for the Fusion, who we saw debut as a flex support for Fusion because Boombox was out this past week. So they cannot play until the start of Stage 2. Now, we do know that Boston is in contract negotiations with Fusions, looking to sign him to a standard Overwatch League contract, and if approved, that would make Fusions eligible to compete in all future matches for Boston. So, looking back, I remember when they first started talking about two-way players. It said absolutely nothing about you only being able to play like 2 matches altogether. They basically said if you appear in like so many, that just means you're not eligible to play in Contenders. But it didn't say anything about, you can only play 2 matches and then you're done the rest of the stage. And there seems to be a lot of like hearsay about, maybe what the league office had told the teams, what information was actually given to them. This is really the first the public has been hearing about this, and it's just caused like this influx of confusion amongst the community, and it definitely, looking at the current meta, impacts Boston Uprising heavily, which, spoilers, is going to play a very big part in our power rankings this week, because we saw a massive shift with Boston Uprising. But I want to get your guys' takes on the ruling itself and what your thought was about the time frame of this happening, because it seemed to happen like 5-10 minutes before the start of the actual match, where we found out that Fusions wasn't actually going to be able to play.
Slambo, you want to take this one first?
I mean, I'll just hop in and say this. I feel like we need to be completely prepared for more things like this to happen. I mean, I'm not sure if you guys know this, but this is only season 2 of the Overwatch League, and Contenders is on season 3, but it's on a much quicker schedule through seasons. So, I mean, there's going to be some growing pains, and certainly I'm not trying to justify the way the rule is written, because that's absurd. And I'm certainly not trying to justify the timing of how it came down, because that's even more absurd. But I just feel like there's a point we can acknowledge that it's strange. We can say this was kind of, bad timing. Why didn't we know about this sooner? Think about the impact it has to the teams. But we just need to be prepared. This is going to happen more and again, because that is just the place that we're in. We're in that pupus stage. We're just becoming a real kind of sport, and we're really going through true regulation, and those things take time to iron out. I think there's going to be a swift rule change from this. Like, we're going to learn something quickly, and I'm not saying it's at all good, but I just at the same time am trying to be a bit understanding, or trying to voice that I understand that these things also have a lot of cooks in the kitchen and a lot of different layers to them. And it's tough for just Nate Nanzer to be responsible. Now, that's his job, is to take this bullet. But, I don't know. I'm kind of going through many different points here in my brain. But the overall thing is real big bummer, huge impact to Boston and to Philly. But I won't expect to see this rule continue in the future. And I don't know. It does cost them money. I just thought about that. That does make it painful. So big bummer, but hey, got to crack a few eggs to make an omelet.
I'm glad you went.
I'm sorry.
I'm glad you went the understanding route, because to me, this is just a weird ass rule that stopped a player from playing for a dumbass reason. Like that's 100% what. That's basically what this rule was. There should be absolutely no punishment for a player that is advancing. Like, I get understanding not wanting to flood Contenders with OWL level talent. Like that is 100% a justifiable reason. But as soon as that player plays 2 games and they want him to play a third, he's just not eligible for Contenders anymore, and he's an Overwatch League player. And then you let him play and you negotiate an Overwatch League contract. That's how the rule should have been written. This whole 2 and then you're done, but then you're not eligible for Contenders. And they made this so overly complicated that even they didn't understand it until 5 minutes before the match. Like, that's how bad this was. And the flip side of this is, look at Dogman, okay? Dogman is in almost the same exact situation. Dogman played the previous season of Contenders, was called up to the main roster. The only difference was Dogman was never made a 2-way player, and he is still absolutely eligible to play because he's played 3 games at this point. So it's a rule that doesn't make sense, and Slambo, I think, nailed it, in that we will not see this rule last for very long, because multiple people have tweeted out, like, all right, put your pitchforks down. Blizzard is in negotiations. We are talking about this. But on the other side, like you said, until they figure this out, Boston took a huge trend downward, because Axiom just did not do it for the team. And I know part of that is because Fusions was their shot caller at this point. Anybody who knows anything about Fusions knows he's very loud. So he is like the key shot caller. And if we saw anything with teams this week, like Philly and Boston, shot callers are very important in this meta. So I don't have a lot of hope in Boston, but if they can bring Fusions back, it's not like I don't think they could start winning games again.
Yeah, and I just quickly want to note too, the other thing that really confused me was the fact that Boston, when they basically were talking about fusions, they had labeled it as a promotion. So at that point, we all pretty much felt like, okay, like, so he's not on a two-way contract anymore. He's promoted to the main roster. And then this happens. Like, what is going on? But I do quickly want to note, Slambo, you're like, yeah, it hurts Philadelphia too, but we saw Elk on not his main role, and it was brutal. But I get what you're saying, because normally he'd be subbing up for Neptuno. But man, Philadelphia looked like a completely different team this past week, and a lot of that was just due to the fact that they were without Boombox and Elk was on a brand new role. But it is a really bad spot for both of them, because both of them have very high uptick on the teams that they are in, and now we're just not going to be able to see that play out unless we see a new contract pop up. So it'll be a really curious thing to see how it plays out, and I agree with you guys. I don't expect this rule-in to actually last. I know they're trying to to keep the integrity of contenders, but at the end of the day, if you're getting called up to the big leagues, people are going to want to see you play. You're going to have a lot of buzz, and I can only imagine, like, if Nene was never promoted, how big of an impact that would have had on New York, because you basically see Nene come in and he's just been kind of holding down the fort for NYXL, and Fusions had a very similar effect for Boston Uprising, at least in that first week. And then this led to our next story, which was a very historic moment, at least for the Overwatch League. It was very high emotions. People were crying in the audience. It was just a lot of raw emotion, and it was all due to the fact that Shanghai Dragons snapped the 42-game losing streak and picked up their first win in Overwatch League history. So, let this be a lesson to everyone. Nobody beats the Shanghai Dragons 43 times in a row. So the Dragons beat Boston Uprising 3-1, in which we saw Gamzu go up against his former team. So, a little bit of redemption there, and I'm sure that was a little bittersweet to get the Dragons' first win over Boston. But what kind of was a sour moment, at least a little bit for me, was the fact that you had Gaguri, who started the series, and only ended up playing at map 1, and then she did not see play for the remainder of that series. So basically you had an entirely different Dragons roster. You didn't have any of the original the season 1 team in for the first win at that point. So that was kind of a bittersweet moment, but I have to say I didn't see the viewership spike that I was kind of expecting, but it did not take away from the moment in itself, and everyone really seemed to embrace it. And for the Dragons, let's see whether or not that this is going to be something for them to build off of, and hopefully not get derailed immediately, because their next match is going to be pretty spicy, because they're probably facing the best team in the league right now in New York Excelsior. So it'll be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. No, no, go ahead, Spider, please, because mine's angry. I need to calm down.
No, I think to Shanghai's credit, they looked really good. Like, it wasn't like a scuffed win. Like, they didn't just barely beat a struggling Boston team. They decimated Boston, everything but the last map. So, to your point, we only saw Gaguri that one map, but they looked really good with Gaguri that one map, and then they kind of switched, gears, and then they relied more on Ding, which Ding looked phenomenal. So this kind of gave me hope as a whole for the team. Like, the team synergy is building, and as a whole, I'm glad that we're seeing like an upward trend, and it wasn't like a scuffed what we would have saw if they won the Florida game last season, like the brawl of the bottom, where both teams were throwing out alts, and there was like a grab on the wrong map, and who knows what was going on at that point. This was a clean win, and you can't take it away from the Dragons. Like, they executed everything they needed to do. The team fights are clean. The alt usage is clean. All in all, like, everything they did outside of parts of the fourth map, looked like a team that could be a middle of the pack team. Like, they didn't do anything different to me than, say, like Chengdu or, even the Spark at this point. Like, Spark has had much dirtier moments and won games. So I'm happy for the Dragons. I'm glad the streak is broken. They got that monkey off their back. Now they can concentrate on playing. So now Slambo can be angry.
Well, first off, you kind of distracted me because at one point while you were talking, I thought to myself, you said battle for the bottom. I was like, scrap for the scum. The war of the warts. I don't know. I just kept like playing all these like different, melee of the muck. I just kept like playing all these voices in my head of like Florida versus Shanghai in season 1. I don't know why I went there, but anyway, I'll kind of get back to angry. Totem, why does it matter there was a roster change? We don't do that in other sports. I feel like if like the Cleveland Browns are the Cleveland Browns, like 0-16 to 1-15, there was a lot of roster changes both of those years, but we don't always attribute like all that credit to those rosters. So I don't care that the roster is not the same. The wins still had a ton of impact, hence the tears. And 2, I don't care if Gaguri plays no maps this season. She's on the roster. She's the spiritual representation of 0-40. Like, she went through hell in season 1, like not getting a taste of victory. I understand it's not on the same scale, and I don't even think it's worth bringing up necessarily. But at one point, I had a fairly successful local Overwatch team that we did pretty good. We had a pretty good run of it. We beat a team that was arguably better than us based on their skill rating in a big tournament for cash money. Either way, this one day I had to play against the same team, but I had to sub in 4 different players. So it wasn't my usual roster. It was 4 subs and me and my other starter. And we had to play them in this tournament. No other team showed up. We had to play them best of 10 maps. Or just, I'm sorry, 10 maps, the best record wins. Win or lose, we can go 10-0. We're going to play all 10 maps was the plan. We lost every map. So I'm trying to bring this up just to bring up this long-winded point to say that was a hell of an afternoon. And I can't imagine going through that, extrapolated out to a professional league, extrapolated out to 40 matches, which consist of 4 maps each. I can't even fathom what Gaguri went through. Goodness gracious, Totem. I'm going to calm down, but it doesn't matter. Gaguri has the monkey off the back. It's time to move forward. And no better way to do that than for Gamsu to get revenge against his old team without even a name tag on his jersey. Have a good day.
All right. So with that in mind, is this what new streak is starting this next week? Are we building off the winning streak, or are we starting a new losing streak?
I'm going to do a hot take here. And I'm going to say it's going to be the Washington Justice that we are chasing that next win for. I don't think it's going to be nearly as long as 0-40. Shoot, I don't think it's going to be 0-10. But I feel like that's the team we're going to be following to the first W in the win column. Wait, for the first mark in the W. Who's in charge? I'll shut up now. The point is the Washington Justice.
I think you're just going to start a mediocre season for the Shanghai Dragons. That's You're gonna find a gatekeeper team, a gatekeeper to the bottom, a gatekeeper to the middle. That's yet to be seen. But I think they finally ascended to take their place as not the worst, but into mediocrity.
I like it. Well, there's only one way to go but up at this point. So with that being said, let's go ahead and have a few debate topics as we figure out what is fact or fiction on a number of different topics related to Stage 1, week number 2. So over the first couple of weeks, we have seen a lot of things play out for the Philadelphia Fusion, and one of the things that has kind of been at the forefront is their reliance on running Winston in the 3-3 composition. Does that make Fusion too predictable with where they're at right now? Because looking back in this past week, Elk was in, they ran a lot of Winston, and the Primal Rage usage, at least getting the ult up and ready to go in time didn't always play out, where there was a lot of disruption on the high ground. Have Fusion become too predictable right now?
Yes. I mean, they even joke about it in the promo videos. They say they have trash goats. That's what they run. And that's the only thing they can run. So I think this really hurts them. And we saw, last season we talked about the peaks and the valleys, but as a whole, this is definitely going to be a valley for them if they continue to run Winston. So they need to show some level of flexibility, especially in this meta, running Reinhardt. If they try to stick to Winston, they're going to keep losing games.
Slambo's linking the dance moves in the chat.
No, I mean, it's not just that. I mean, like, I feel like this one to me is one of the tougher ones to answer. So, I mean, part of me is still deciding whether I really do land fact or fiction because, okay, I'm going to answer it. Fiction. Okay. But the reason I'm hesitating is because I do feel like the question in and of itself is so specific that it's correct that when they do rely on the Winston, it does make them a little bit more predictable and a little more easy to counter. I do think. At the same time, I don't think it's really been a fair litmus test without their true starting lineup. And I understand that Elk and the off-roll hinders their normal synergy and performance. So I just feel like this is a tough week to answer this question. I'm kind of go both ways. But I will lean fiction because I do think that a roster with synergy and confidence can make up for a lot of mistakes or predictability.
I will say too, we have seen the usage of Primal Rage be really good in certain aspects, but it hasn't always necessarily been in regards to high ground control. It's been more about environmental kills and just getting that clean sort of dive on the support line. And for now, I feel like you can definitely say that something like this is plausible. We see a lot of teams have a good mix of running not only the Winston, but the Reinhardt on the 3-3. And we've also seen a couple of teams primarily run the Reinhardt iteration like Paris Eternal, but they just happen to do it a little bit better than most of the other teams. But I feel like it's still a little bit too early to judge where Fusion are as a 3-3 team. And I feel the comments about the trash goats is more of a meme than anything, just because of the way that, Jane kind of called them out on it. And we saw how that played out here in the last week. But moving on, let's kind of look at the other end of the main tank spectrum and talk about someone that has been name dropped quite a bit, regarded as one of the best Reinhardts in the Overwatch League. And we got to see some statistics here in this last week about Bumper from the Vancouver Titans, who is leading the charge in a lot of different stat categories for Reinhardt players. So, despite what the stats have shown, is Bumper not the best Reinhardt in Overwatch League? Is there someone else that comes to mind for you guys?
I'm going to go first here, Spider. This is written very weird, Totem. Is he not the best tank? I think that he's not the best tank. Wait, I mean, I think no. In all seriousness, I don't think he's not. Okay, thank you for getting it. No, I don't think he is the best pure tank. I feel like the best way I can justify that is some of those stats that he is the best in. Some people on my team in competitive would argue that I'm doing it wrong. And to a certain extent, I feel like they're right. And I probably swing my hammer a bit too much. And I'm probably looking for those fire strike kills. And I'm probably looking for those charge kills just a little too much. So I feel like, again, like on paper, that's where I kind of hesitate and say, like, you probably shouldn't have that and probably not the best thing. I do understand there's kind of an asterisk or a qualification that with this team, I mean, they have an aggressive style in general. So merely he just kind of knows his rubber band. He knows his leash range. And so he kind of plays within his system. But I think if we're just trying to look at who is the best main pure tank, I feel like there's other people that come up in that category, especially other tanks that don't have as nearly as good of an off tank as he has in Janu. So I feel like, he's not the best Reinhardt in Overwatch League, but he's certainly I'm gonna hesitate to say top 3. I'd say he's top 3 main tanks in the Overwatch League.
I'm gonna agree that I don't think he's the best Reinhardt in the Overwatch League, but I'm gonna disagree for a very different reason. In that right now we're only in week 2. So playtime, number of games, schedule, all of that really weigh heavily on stats and what players look like. I absolutely think he should be in the talk for, is he one of the best Reinhardts in the league? Absolutely. But it's too early to tell. He's been phenomenal, but there have been other Reinhardts. Ben Best has showed that he's a phenomenal Reinhardt as well. His stats aren't quite as high. So you can make the argument there of, who is what and based on schedule and all that. So I think it's too early to tell. I will say that one thing that really hurt him is Volskaya this week when he tried to charge a diva into a wall and missed the wall and charged off the map and cost them the point.
He just was staggering 2 players, not 1. It's fine.
So I just think it's too early to tell.
And on that note too, like, we're so used to seeing the Volskaya like roof slide in, the skate in there, that we don't expect to see it, outside of the map. So I thought that was a really nice touch from Bumper this past week. Well, speaking of main tanks, Hanjo Spark had been very up and down already. Week 1 was really good. Week 2, not so much. So is it time for the Spark to reconsider who to start at the main tank? Because right now they are primarily leaning towards running No Smite over Gushway. Do we need to see some changes from them?
Fact. Sorry, just want to jump in here and say fact. I don't think that we really need a ton of explanation or a ton of analysis here. That certainly seems to be a weak spot on that roster and a role on that team that obviously just needs some change. I don't know. I feel like Happy's Widow has been a highlight. I feel like Rio's becoming. Oh wait, what am I doing? Oh, that's the wrong team. What am I doing? Ooh, wrong team. Good job. Hey, Totem, are you proud of me? I caught it that time. I knew I was doing it right away. I was usually you have to yell at me like I'm getting
wrong,
there.
Wrong Chinese team.
I know, God, I still like blend like the colors in my brain wrong. But either way, I mean, I just feel like that's a roster with a strong support line too. Forgive me, Bebe, BB, and I don't know. I just feel like any change in that role will help them. They looked great in week 1. There was definitely a fall off into week 2. And that seemed to be what a lot of people were focusing on, not just probably us in this question. So I think that's a fair assumption. Whew. I'm going to stop drinking.
Nailed it. So I'm going to agree. I think it's absolutely fact, because main tank is one of the most important spots in this meta, and they need to figure out which main tank they want so they can learn the play style around that main tank, because No Smite and Gushway play 2 very different styles of main tank. So they need to pick which one the team synergizes best with, which unfortunately at this point, with the roster we've seen, not seeing Sasson, I would probably say is No Smite. Like they prefer that slow roll style, whereas Gushway is heavily aggressive. And Sasson may bring that aggressive to the team, and I can change my mind when I see them play together. But they need to decide. Like, you can't swap main tanks. Look at teams in season 1 that didn't have a solid main tank or a consistent main tank, and look where they finished season 1. Like, you just have to figure out who your main tank is.
Yeah, I would like to say that is something that's important to me, is like, let's also reserve a ton of judgment for when Sasson shows up, because that's when you really start to see the true synergies. And we mentioned that there was a possible more noticeable synergy between Gushway and Sasson during scrims, preseason scrim bucks.
To that point too, everyone kind of talks about how much value do scrimbucks really provide. And I have to say, like, for the most part, a lot of things that we were hearing from scrims have been holding up fairly well. And one of the easiest ways to look at that is to kind of look at the inconsistencies from London Spitfires play in the current meta. Now, granted, we've already seen them address those issues in week 2, which was nice to see. But definitely there are things holding their weight when it comes to all of the talks coming from scrimmages. But moving on, we talk about the Shanghai Dragons history, but there was another, record-breaking moment. So, it's kind of historic. And this is probably something that, looking at the current meta, may or may not be broken by the same player time and time again. It's just going to depend on how long the maps are, but I want to get your guys' take on the record that we saw broken multiple times in week number 2, and that was for the record for most damage done in a map. Is that record going to be shattered again this stage? And if so, if you guys agree with this one, who do you guys think is going to be the Zarya to break it? Because if anyone's going to break it, and, it's always been the Zarya players in this case, who do you think will top out the record?
Let me just jump in real quick and say, a fact, we will see more damage records broken because the league appears to be a little bit more balanced than it was before. So what we're going to see is a lot more close competitions. And I feel like that's what's going to drive the number up because you're going to time more maps, go longer rounds. Pretty simple to me. I will say that if you're going to ask me who it was, I was not prepared for this. But I'm going to go out there on a limb and pick a player that not necessarily anyone considers the best Zarya in the league today, but someone who I certainly see as an up-and-coming Zarya, and I'm just going to put my money on this horse while I see it moving, and that's Ivy from the Toronto Defiant.
That's a good pick. And I agree. I think this is fact. I mean, as the league goes on, the matches get closer and closer, and like Slambo said, all the matches seem to be, a lot closer this season. So unless you're playing the Dallas Fuel Thursday or Friday, a 4-0 is very unlikely, it seems. But I mean, the fights are going longer and longer. I mean, I think it was either this week or last week, there was a fight where 14 ultimates were used and not a single person died. So these fights are going absurdly long. I think you're absolutely right. It's going to be a Zarya player. I would probably put my money on Janu, just because he consistently stays around. Like I'm really curious to see what like his first deaths in fights are, because they also threw out the statistic. Whereas if your Zarya dies first in the fight, you're only like 5% likely to win that fight. So I think whoever the Zarya is that dies first the least, I think that's going to be the Zarya that takes it. So I am curious to see, how this goes. And it will probably be on a 2CP map where we go like 8-7 again or something like that.
I do want to note too, I feel like a lot of that is also going to depend on whether or not the Graviton surges are actually landing. Because there's been a lot of defense matrices just eating those grabs up like there is no tomorrow. We got to see that in quite a few of the series here in this past week. And, if anyone's going to break it, the thing is, there's so many Zaryas that have great mechanical skill. Like, I would not be surprised if the Fran breaks a record at some point, or Su breaks it for the Titans. Ivy is a good pick, though, and Titans have looked good, and the Defiant, for a team that we haven't really talked about that much, they've really shown up. And plus, on top of that, they get Neko back this week, which I'm really excited to see. So that team is looking scarier and scarier as the season progresses, and I cannot wait to see what the addition of Neko is going to bring to that lineup, because that just gives them even more frag potential that they didn't quite have to that same extent. Now, looking back, we have seen a lot of different strategies playing out in the season already, and going into the season, there was a lot of talk of, well, just how good is Reaper going to be? So, thus far, do you guys feel like the Reaper strats have been a major bust?
Fact. I mean, you can't argue with it. Every time, it's like we've talked about time and time again. If Reaper was good on that point prior to his buff, he's better on that point. So, like, he's decent on Anubis B, and he's still good on Anubis B. If he wasn't good prior to the buff, he's still not good. 3-3 will just run over him, double sniper, a Widow Junkrat on Anubis A. Like there's not much he can do to close the distance. So his weaknesses are just exaggerated in the Overwatch League. So teams need to figure out, it is okay to run Reaper in very specific instances, especially in this meta, but stop trying to fit him in, willy-nilly.
Well, Spider, let me tell you, I'm going to come in from left field here and say the question says Reaper tactics have been a major bust this season. I'm going to say fiction because the Reaper pick has been a major bust this season. I don't think it's a matter of how you use him. And I understand to your point that certain points he lends himself a little better to. But I think even the scenarios where we've seen him on those points, it hasn't been effective. So it's not only is it wrong tactics with a Reaper, I think it's a bad Reaper pick. That's really the true root of the problem.
It seems like the times that it works best, though, is when you're basically having the enemy come to you, because at that point, there's not that much of a gap between you and the enemy team, and you're not having to, make up all of that distance. But there's definitely been some times where the Reaper pick just, especially on attack, and everyone will know who I'm going to talk about, because there's a certain high-profile DPS player who decided to play Reaper for the Outlaws. That it didn't work at all. It happens. But who knows? It's still early on. Maybe someone's going to pull it out, and we will see a lot of damage. I just want to see the return of Beyblade. That's all I want. I want to see them speed in. I want to see the Nano Boost on the Reaper, the Death Blossom come out. It's got to happen. We haven't seen it, because then and only then am I going to say that the Reaper tactics and strategies have been a total wash at this point. I hope we get to see it at some point. So to wrap things up, there's been a lot of talk from a certain coach in the Overwatch League. We got to see it on Twitter in regards to Carpe and the Fusion's Trash Goats. We also saw it post-match from Jane himself. So fact or fiction, guys, Jane is the best heel in the Overwatch League.
That's 100% fiction. He's just the best coach personality in the league. He talks crap, and sometimes they back it up. And if he doesn't fail, he doesn't apologize for it, really. He's just like, oh, yeah, we screwed up. We'll fix it. And besides, everybody knows Monty is the best heel in the league. Like, Jane, no matter what he does, is just creating banter. Whereas Monty, generates, animosity when he talks. I don't even know. Like, Jane, when he talks crap, people are like, oh, you're talking crap. But then they also have that soft side, oh yeah, he does care and stuff like that. Whereas Monty, you don't feel that way. Like Monty, you're just like, dude, he's kind of a D-bag.
Okay. Is Monty in the league? No.
He's a personality.
He's a personality, but I feel like John Madden wasn't in the league. He was a personality. I feel like Tony Romo left the league to become a personality. So I will
and he made it to the Super Bowl.
Right, he did. Dang right he did. But I only bring that up to say fact. Jane is the best heel in the league. I agree that in the Overwatch community, Monte Cristo is an anime villain, as so depicted in that amazing video. No argument there. But I feel like in the league, as far as coach or player, he's doing the job. He's kind of like the Batman. He's a symbol of what we need, and I mean that from an experience of two things. One, I actually hated it at first. And when I saw his video of him yeah, they're trash. That's trash goats. I was like, wow, I hate you, Jane. I used to like you and I hate you. But then I was like, you know what? This makes it more fun. This makes the rivalry and this makes the spice and this makes the flavor. So I kind of went from this place of hating Jane to thinking of how smart and tactical he is. And he knows the role he has to play. Again, he goes to this, what the team needs, not what it wants. He's doing such a good job of that. So I'll give him that credit. And then the second kind of facet to this is that I feel like I definitely want to see more of it. So I hope that Jane is kind of this snowball effect to the rest of the league and kind of speeds up the process of some of this smack talk, because his was kind of aggressive and pretty upfront. And then his kind of interview, pantomimed, scheduled written interview for him was fine. Because Carpe came out hot, to his replies and was saying some strong things. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm really just enjoying the banter. I want to see more of it. Jane's doing a good job of being that heel. And at the same time, I mean, still like the coach for the Dallas Fuel. So like, you kind of feel bad for him. I'm just kidding, Spider. I'm just kidding.
Not only that, he is the support coach for the Dallas Fuel. So he's extremely aggressive for the position that he coaches.
That is true.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the match that was between the LA Gladiators and the Paris Eternal. So, Spider, we started off on Village, and we got to see the Diva subbed out for one of your favorite heroes in May. So we got to see a little bit of the Snoats. We got to see a lot of May walls. And really, what can you say about the analysis for round one? Because it was pretty obvious what the plan was going in.
Yeah, it was basically like, hey, you guys want to get to the point? No, there's a wall in the way. Stop and have your team from getting there. And the rest of our team is just going to murder you one by one. And that's how you play May Goats. Like, and the casters broke it down beautifully, like after the match. Like they called it as it was happening. But after the match, they were like, look, Gladiators were depending on May to make a mistake. And that's not how you have to play against that matchup. And that's why they lost it 100-0. Is Soon is a very good player, and he is not typically going to make those mistakes. So I was happy to see that we got to see the Snoats on a point. And this is a point that we've seen it happen before occasionally, but it wasn't like a regular strategy. So I expect to see like this, possibly like Ilios Lighthouse, May becoming more of a staple, even on Busan on I think it's downtown. May Snoats is very popular, or it was. So I expect to see May integrated more and more as time goes on, just because she is a really strong counter to Goats. Because if you have a good May player, it's very easy to split a Goats team, especially with the way some of these teams play Goats, is they're not all bunched up like they need to be. That being said, had the Gladiators tried to pull this against Paris, I don't think it would have worked, because Paris plays like a very tight, like Goats formation. So I was just happy to see May. Like you said, she's one of my favorite characters. I know most people like call her Satan and all that stuff, but I'm happy to see that she actually like did work. It was almost like the Torbjorn effect when Defran pulled out Torbjorn and won that match. It's kind of like vindicating for me at least.
Yeah, and towards the tail end of that round, Shaz was going to move over to the Ana, because they weren't running the Diva, so, Landon, the shots, Landon, the Bionades would have been a lot better. But the problem was, he didn't switch till it was like 92% control at that point, which was way too late. But I kind of want to get your thoughts on running Ana in that situation when... Just because they don't have a Diva doesn't necessarily mean that you're still going to have the same effectiveness with the Bionade, just because of the May walls just controlling off and splitting off the team. More times than not, grabbing at least 2 or 3 people and isolating them from the other half.
It is a calculated risk. I think running the Ana over the Zen at that point with the May instead of the Diva is the right choice in most situations. Sure, you're going to have the wall and you're going to have that, but as long as, say, only one person gets isolated with the Ana, you can turn that fight around a lot easier than you can with the Zen, just because of healing output. Like your team can do work as long as Zarya's still got the charge, as long as you still have the Diva defense matrixing. You have a possibility of turning that around. And we actually saw it in it was either this match or one of the other matches where they swapped off a Diva, and the team did switch to Ana over Zen. and it worked. Like they were able to do that. And then as soon as the D.Va came out, they immediately got off of Ana. So it is the right call, but it was way too late at that point for the Gladiators.
Yeah, that 5% just doesn't even give you time to leave the spawn really at that point. And I know you actually already mentioned this earlier, but they did pull out that Zarya stat about, the Zarya dying first and how it affects the team fight at that point. And that was on round 2, which was on Shrine. Mm-hmm. Basically, Soon was the first to fall for the Eternal. They popped up that stat card, and the stat was that teams that lost Zarya first have only won 5.9% of the team fights. Now, in this 3-3 meta right now, there's no denying how important Zaryas are to that composition, because Zarya is a damage dealer. And that's why we keep seeing Zarya shattering the damage record. And it happened multiple times in week number 2. And a lot of this just boils down to being able to reset the energy, because when you die as Zarya, you end up losing all the energy. And there are a lot of situations where these Zarya players are averaging 58, 60% energy across the entirety of the map. So losing your Zarya first is definitely a big blow to the team. And for the most part, it seemed like the Zarya players at times looked really good, and then when it came to the ult management, trying to get the Graviton Surges off, there was a lot of struggle in there, just due to the fact that a lot of the Graviton Surges were kind of falling to the wayside, getting eaten up by the defense matrix. And I want to say there was at least one map where there was like 6 Gravitons thrown out, and only like one of them landed.
That was I think that was point B.
It's just crazy to see like how far the Divas have come, because there was a lot of talk about like, well, how's the defense matrix management going to be with the recent changes to D.Va? And we've been seeing more and more ultimates getting eaten up by the D.Va players, and just the fact that we get to see it in the kill feed now has definitely added some extra spice to the commentators as well.
Yeah, I mean that was the story of point B. Was Soon dies first, Gladiators take the point. Okay, Soon doesn't die, Paris takes the point. Soon dies first, Gladiators take the point. And that's basically how it went. And then there was a bunch of grabs, thrown out and eaten or missed like that. And I'll talk about it later, but I think that's one of Paris's faults. Like, Paris doesn't have a whole lot of faults in the 3-3 meta, but their grav usage is absolutely one of them. And that falls 100% on Soon, because I can't believe that the usage of the gravs, as we'll see, as we talk about this a little more, is really being called. Like, I can't see a shot caller calling for grav when 4 people are dead. Like, there are just instances where Soon would throw it out, and if it gets eaten at the beginning of a fight, that's one thing. That means that he needs to work on his mind games with the D.Va and stuff like that, or the how good the D.Va is. But if you're throwing it out in the middle or at the end of the fight, that's gonna fall on you. But honestly, point 2 just came down to Gladiators isolating Soon early and then just running over the rest of Paris.
So we did go to round number 3, which was played on Sanctum, and really one of the key differences in Sanctum, or at least one of the highlights, definitely was the Primal Rage usage. We saw a ton of environmental kills, whether it was Roar, on the Gladiator side, or Benbest for the Paris Eternal. I know it was looking really bad for the Gladiators, and they weren't able to actually flip the point until they got up to 99%. And basically, Finzi opens it up, he eats another one of Surefour's Graviton Surges, and Surefour ends up getting punched into the pit at that point. Roar comes in, dives in, gets 2 Primal Rage kills to flip the point at 99%. And, we kind of see it. We saw Hip looking to use the Transcendence. Roar knocks him into the pit, so that's a feels bad moment for the Zenyatta player. And Gladiators are just able to bring it back. Soon ends up falling first, and the Gladiators end up coming out on top. Of course, Cruz, as a Lucio player, is able to force the overtime, but the Gladiators end up taking map number 1. So this would bring us on to Numbani for map number 2. And for the most part, we got to see the Roar trying to get knock the high ground approach, and that ends up giving Eternal the opening frag on Big Goose. But then you just have Shaz answering right back, ends up finding Ben Best, and Gladiators are rarely up and end up taking the points. So this is where Roar starts to get like that aggression on him. He comes in with the Shatter, catches Eternal basically off guard. We see the bomb come through for Void. That ends up resulting in a 3K. And we see like the Streets phase go pretty quick up until the point where Hip just he peeks the corner, finds the right click at the start of the fight, and then we see the follow-up kill, which ends up being the thing that kind of helps the Eternal start to stabilize here. But on the Gladiators attack, with Numbani, that last point isn't a guarantee. And it seems like out of the majority of the maps that we have seen that are hybrid, that one's the one that seems to be the less completed one so far. And it just seems like get into that second objective is a given. But regardless of what the time management is on the clock, a lot of teams cannot seem to finish that point, whether it's 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and they get stalled for the most part at the very end. So what is it about that map do you feel like is causing the teams not to be able to successfully attack and complete the map?
It's just the closeness to spawn. Like Numbani C has traditionally been a hard point to take, and in this meta, it's still very hard. Although the tank based compositions have always been traditionally what you use to take point C, but a lot of teams have been running different attacks on A and B, so they have to go into C, switch their whole strategy into tank based comps. We didn't really see that this match. But that's traditionally why we've seen teams, fail to take C. I will want to note that on the Gladiators attack this round, there was a moment where they almost didn't take B until Surefour and Shaz just clutched it out. And with the help of Void, here and there, just decimated the whole Paris team like one by one. Like Shaz just went off while Surefour was just in their face holding down left click. So there were a lot of like really brawly fights. Even the last fight on this map or this round of attack went for a lot longer than we really see. And this was kind of going back to my point earlier, is teams are learning more and more that you kind of need to stick out a fight a lot longer than maybe traditionally. Like in dive, if one of your DPS dies, you kind of back off immediately, whereas there have been a lot of instances, specifically in this match, whereas you would lose one, as long as that wasn't your Zarya, you could brawl it out and still win it. So I really liked what Gladiators did on attack. It's just like you said, it's just hard to finish that map overall. You're muted.
Oh, Totem is?
Oh, no, I am muted. I hit my button because you were talking.
Okay.
So one of the things that we saw from the Gladiators was they felt like it was necessary for them when it came to the 3-3 to do the mirror composition. So we got to see a lot of Rhine v. Rhine. And we saw how that played out. So I want to get your thought on the decision to actually do that, because we have seen Gladiators do a lot of flipping between running the Winston on the main tank and also running the Reinhardt. Do you feel like primarily sticking with the Reinhardt was the right move to make against a team that has been known to be prolific with the Reinhardt in the 3-3 comp?
I don't know. I feel like I feel like it's that Roar did not look great in that matchup, and so it was surprising that they did not try to mix it up. It seemed like they had the opportunity to, but I kind of also understand where they're coming from, and that one of the best ways to beat the 3-3 is to kind of, to beat the 3-3. I really truly feel that. To your point, though, I mean, they're doing it against arguably one of the best teams in the league in that composition. At the same time, I don't feel like it necessarily was as much of a problem with Roar as I feel like it was kind of an issue more with like Void and Sureford. He wasn't really getting the same level of support that Ben Best was. So I guess inherently that's your question is, was it a bad move? Well, yeah, it was. But again, I don't think it's more so from Roar's perspective, but I just don't see that even in the best case scenario that Void or Sureford are going to prop up Roar like possibly, Soon and Finzi can do. That's all.
All right, well, we did end up going to a Temple of Anubis for our Assault map, and in true 2CP fashion, guys, it's going to be a shocker, but we ended in a draw. No, it's crazy.
What?
The
Wait,
series...
Totem, what? No
right?
way.
Right? But what I absolutely love to see is that the Gladiators come out when they were on defense, and we see the classic defense composition running the Orisa with the Junkrat and the Widowmaker. Unfortunately, that did not bode so well. So we've kind of seen the attacks and the defenses evolve over time. What were you guys feeling when you saw the Gladiators roll out with such a classic composition? Like, were you feeling it? Did you think it was gonna work, or were you just expecting the snowball kind of from the get-go, which is what we did end up getting?
Snowball. That's it.
See, I actually thought it had a chance to work because it is really strong on that point. They just played it absolutely horribly. Like the Sureford missed the shots he needed to hit on Nico. Honestly, had Sureford killed Nico, that fight would have went very differently. But they let Nico sit in the back, and even though Nico didn't, click on any heads, he was pumping constant damage into them, basically uncontested at that point, because Sureford was getting chased around. He failed to land the shots when he needed to. It was basically just a calamity of errors for the Gladiators. It could possibly work against 3-3 because Junkrat's really good against 3-3 on that point because they have very like narrow chokeways that they have to get through. But we saw the opposite side of it. It can absolutely not work well against it. So I was happy to see them try it. Unfortunately, with the way it turned out, I don't think we'll see it again in this meta unless they're like stupidly sure they're going to win on it.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. We did see a little bit of a different iteration in regards to the approach for Paris on their time bank attack because we did see them roll out with the triple DPS. So, not something we see every day.
They're not all goats all day. They got something else in there. Nico can play Pharah.
I mean, they did take point A, but, at the end of the day, B just wasn't happening on either side. So this would bring us to map number 4, which was Dorado. This is a map that is another one of those maps that, looking back at contenders, there were a lot of issues, a lot of despair on Dorado. And, for the most part, we've seen a lot of approaches, whether it's high ground, defense on point B. We've got to see a little bit of Widowmaker play. But this was basically just a ton of 3-3. So no surprise seeing the mere 3-3 compositions coming out. And I have to say, the defense side of Eternal, I was not expecting them to be able to hold on, especially late when Void ends up finding to the self-destruct. But, with the close respawn, they were eventually able to hold it out. And then on the Eternal side of things, there seems to be a lot of disconnect on the Gladiators in regards to who they actually need to save. So a lot of times what was happening is Roar was getting focused early, and then, Void was either looking to move up to get the bubble on him, try to build that energy, or he was late on the barrier on the main tank, but there were a lot of times where, they would look to drop Roar, he'd get low, they'd save him, and then the Eternal will just shift to Void and end up demeching Void early. So that's something that we got to see quite a bit. And this is another one of those series where there was heavy ult usage on both sides that resulted in 0 kills. But no, it was not like the 14 ultimates. So no absurdity like that. But there were times where I know Eternal had like 4.5 minutes left on the clock. And it was not enough time for them to close out the map for the most part, just because like they ended up getting stuck on that third part for quite some time. And it seems like, you know, those damn doorways on the third part of the map have been a nuisance. And I remember there was a point where someone got like whipped off of the map when they kind of went through kind of like the middle ground approach, which I thought was pretty interesting because we don't necessarily get to see a ton of environmental kills on that map. So that's always nice to see whenever those do pop up.
Yeah, that was Cruz that got Brigitte whip flailed off the side of the map trying to sneak in the side door. But all in all, like you pretty much summed up this map. It was goats v goats. They both went really well on attack till they hit the third point. They both stalled out. Gladiators stalled out a little more than Paris. Paris landed a big combo at the end and was able to close out the map. That's really the only difference in this map. Like their attacks were almost identical. Sure, they had a little pitfall here and there in different places, but that's how it went. Like there really wasn't a major fight on this map till point C on both attacks. So that was map 4.
Right. I mean, that is like the inherent nature of the spawn. But I just remark like how close this series was and how close this map was. It's not like Paris finished it with a ton of time in the clock. I think they had like a couple of seconds when they finally won the map. So I just want to like reflect back and say, you know, that's why I feel like that was a smart call for them to sometimes just run the mirror match, because they still played this Eternal team all 4 maps. They played them close in what we consider them to be the strongest in this meta, possibly from like a character to character perspective. And that really speaks well to, I think, the support lineup of the Gladiators. But I digress. Really just a fun map. Even if it's not the most fun meta all the time as a spectator, I really enjoyed that map, and the casters did a great job of keeping it hype.
Yeah, I think to your point, like Shaz and Big Goose really delivered on this whole series. Sure, for Zarya play is getting better, but it still needs a lot of work. Roar needs to work on his positioning. Like if he's not gonna get that support, he has to be a little more tentative with how he positions, because you just kind of have to learn to play around your team. And I'm not pinning that 100% on Roar, because his team should be backing him up, but he should know that he can't get that aggressive if he's not getting that backup. So it's a team play perspective.
It is.
Because you can't just say that's Roar, because Void had the same problem. Void was aggressive multiple times where he would get demacked like super far away from his team, especially on like Anubis. So the Gladiators could have won this one just as easily as Paris did. There was a lot of standout players on both sides. I mean, Cruz looked really good on Lucio. Ben Best still looks like one of the best Rhines. It was a good match. Like I said, this was definitely a match where like minute things could have changed the outcome.
Oh, you mean like the Gladiators having decay? Because that might have been the difference. Anyway, I don't know. I might have missed that when I stepped away to deal with baby puke. So thank you for that.
Well, wasn't eligible this past week because he was still 17, but we will get to see him play this week in one of my picks for the match of the week. But with that being said, we are going to preview just a couple of matches, the one that we are most hyped for, or the ones that we consider to be the marquee matches of the week. So Spider, why don't you go ahead and start us off? Which map out of this week's schedule are you most looking forward to?
I don't know. Which one do you think I'm going to talk about?
Let's go, my dude.
It's gotta be Atlanta, right? I mean, Atlanta versus Paris. We just talked about a whole bunch of Paris hype, and I've been hyping up Atlanta this whole time, and I did a Dallas game last week, so I'm free to not talk about Dallas this week. And they have some rough games this week, so I didn't want to talk about them. But yeah, Paris versus Atlanta. I mean, Paris has come out. I'll go over Paris very quickly. They're one of the best GOATS teams in the league, so they've shown that they're very adept at that 3-3. But they do have some problems. They, soon Zarya and his grav usage has been hit or miss. Like his general Zarya play has been good. He just needs to figure out his alt usage. Defran on the other side has been pretty solid on Zarya while showing that he can flex. So I hope we get to see like a Zarya v Zarya and then like a Tracer v Tracer. Like just have the teams run like the gamut of Soon versus Defran matchups that we ideally would want to see. And speaking of Defran, he can flex. So I think that's going to be Atlanta's road to success, is they need to, not opt for the mirror matchup every time and, flex around and show their flexibility and outplay Paris. But they have to be able to beat Paris in that mirror matchup at times, because there's just points where GOATS is so strong that you have to beat them at 3-3. So they either have to play just as well or better than them to have a chance. And Atlanta just needs to figure out a way to counter Atlanta's weird strategies. I mean, we've seen Bastion, we've seen Tracer, we've seen DPS comps. Like Paris needs to take their 3-3 and, kind of mold it to match Atlanta's aggression. So I think this is going to be a really, really good match. We're going to get to see how these two teams, these two, probably the two, I would maybe argue the best expansion teams right now, like at least the highest trending expansion teams, especially after the Spark kind of took a dive last week, match up against each other. So the players to watch for me, obviously, are going to be Soon and Defran, but more so it's going to be Masa and Cruz. I didn't talk a whole lot about them, but Lucios have really started to dictate how these matches play out. And we saw a lot of it with Cruz in the Paris Gladiators match, where Cruz was getting spooping Reinhardt into the team. And, that was part of Roar's positioning problem. But Masa and Cruz are both very aggressive Lucios. So we'll see how these two play out. And I think they're going to be, the keys to success, as well as, just who plays this better, Zarya, Soon, or Defran. I'm just excited for this match. Like I have 3 pages of notes that I could talk about, but I think that's enough for me.
I like it. All right, well, Slambo, let's go ahead and talk about your match next. And I have to say, this is definitely one that intrigues me, just based off of one, the fact that this involves one of the teams that are probably doing worse than a lot of us expected, but we still feel like are going to be able to bounce back, hopefully sooner rather than later. But in this case, I'm pulling in the opposite direction for the team that they are going up against. So what do you have for your match of the week?
So I feel bad, because I certainly think it looks like on paper I only picked this match because of my runaway fanboy isms, but I do want to defend that and say that the main reason that I picked this match this week is just looking at the records coming into here. We have a 3-0 versus an 0-3. And I feel like it's really not fair to judge the Valiant on the 0-3. And I don't know if it's truly fair to judge the Titans on their 3-0. I'm not trying to say either way that one team's been more impressive and one team's been a bit of a surprise in a bad way. But I don't know. I just think that it really kind of just sets the tone for where these teams are coming into this, is that Vancouver has a lot to lose and the Valiant have a lot to prove. So to me, this is a pretty scary matchup, because the Valiant are hungry to prove they are still one of the top teams. And I think that puts Vancouver in a really dangerous position. I feel like if Vancouver comes into this matchup treating the Valiant like I believe they did the Guangzhou Charge, they're going to put themselves in a really scary position. And I don't necessarily want them to do that, but it certainly could happen. When you kind of think about the map-to-map opportunities, I was looking back at the records of Vancouver and the Valiant on control maps. And I know it's early in the season, but Valiant have done fairly well on control, and Vancouver have lost some control maps, or a lot of the control maps have been really close, even against what we had thought would be subpar competition. So I think that if the Valiant can kind of win the control map game, one, they can kick the series off in their favor and put the momentum into their court. And two, they can win this series, I think, if it goes to that fifth tiebreaker control map. So the Valiant really need to, put a lot of weight into the control maps when they have the opportunity. But I don't know. I really can see them kind of opening up the series and taking the first two rounds quickly and putting Vancouver back into that worried place they were when they came back against the Guangzhou Charge, because it was not a pretty opening map for them. The other thing that I would say, kind of a storyline that I want to pay attention to, is this really kooky Custa thing that we got going on. We saw Custa, I believe, in more maps than we did in week one. Obviously, they played in more games, but we did see him involved a little bit more. So there is something still kind of going on from the perspective of Kuki and Custa, and I'm just really fascinated to kind of see how that plays out. And the other storyline that I'm really choosing to follow is Bumper and Janu. I really feel like they're kind of becoming one of the strongest tank duos in the league, and they're only second to truly Mono and Meko at this point, with some of the synergy in the plays and the really impressive, ult timings that they've shown. But I don't know. I think those are the two things to watch. Can that duo continue to be one of the forefront in the tank conversation? And can the Valiant get off to a quick start and hold that lead against a Vancouver team that's shown a lot of prowess here early? I think you guys were talking too about the importance of Lucio's. I really am enjoying watching Slime play. I feel like his style of Lucio really kind of fits into what you were trying to line up there earlier, Spider. And certainly, I think on Volskaya this week, Totem, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was one map, he did not die the entire Volskaya map. He just did not have a death. I think that was a true testament to his movement ability and his understanding of positioning and how to really be an effective Lucio. So Slime is a really fun player to watch. Some really fun boops. I mean, a lot of great boops. It's not just him. Across the league, the Lucio play is probably at the best it's ever been. If I'm making a prediction, I feel like this is a potential upset for the Titans. I feel like we may see a tie map, and we may see it go 2-1, very similar to the Paris Eternal and the Gladiators match from last week. But yeah, I don't know. I'm cheering for the Vancouver Titans, but I feel like the Valiant have a lot to prove. Even though they're not even trying to maybe compete for the playoffs this stage, they still want to show people that, again, they belong. And what math did I do wrong, Spider? Please call me out on that. I'm so sorry.
Oh no, you said that we saw Custa more times this week than previously. And yes, we saw him 2 maps this week instead of 0.
Was it only 2 maps? Well, I mean, it was 0. Was it last week? I thought he came in for 1 map. I'm sorry that if I was
no, he didn't play at all.
Fair enough. That's why I said more, is I thought he played at least 1, and I thought he played in both series, but only played 2 maps in the New York series. Is that it?
I think so. Yeah.
All right. I thought he played 1.
I didn't catch all of the other series, so I don't want to say for sure, but either way, it was more than 0.
Yeah, honestly, like, to your point, I don't know why I'm asking. Like, if he didn't play any week 1, my bad. I thought he played 1 map, but yeah, 2 is more than 0, guys. Slambo math, write it down.
Slambo forgets that we had this whole segment last week where we were like, "Where is Custa?"
That's all. I get it, but even in the context of that conversation, I was still like, he should be out there starting in that support position. And that, I think that's where my brain took it. So whatever.
No, I'm just messing with you.
I know, but I mixed up like the spark and the charge again tonight. So just, I don't deserve it. I do deserve it. I mean,
well, speaking of the charge, I do quickly want to note, Slambo, that going into this week, the Valiant play 2 matches, as opposed to the Titans, who only play the Valiant. So Valiant, they face the Titans, and they also play the aforementioned charge. So that might also play a little bit of a factor too, having to prepare for 2 different matches. As for myself, I'm going to go a different direction and say that, for one, I'm very hyped about this particular match because of an Overwatch League debut that is bound to happen because he is going to turn 18 this upcoming week, and that is Decay for the LA Gladiators, who will be going up against a team that is potentially on the rebound in the London Spitfire. Now, I know what you guys are thinking, like, it's only been 1 week. We've seen really, really terrible and really good from the London Spitfire. And you know what, guys? You could probably make that argument, but I will say Bird Rain was a glaring issue early on, and they've already addressed that. We saw Profit move over to the Zarya, and the London Spitfire looked like a completely different team, with Profit making the move over to Zarya. Now, of course, there is a little bit of drawbacks with that. You don't have him playing the Brigida on the team, but you're looking for that sort of stability, and with the importance of Zarya kind of being the mainstay of that 3-3 composition, you're not really able to afford not to have Profit on that role. So, for the most part, when I look at this match, one of my biggest concerns, at least for London, is the performance of Gesture, who has been really hit or miss. I've seen a lot of inconsistencies with him, but I feel like with London having already kind of addressed the issues with their 3-3 composition, we're just now starting to see how much this team can uptick. Now that Bird Rain is kind of fallen on the wayside a little bit with the composition, and I feel like the London that we're going to get in this match is going to be the best indicator of how they are in this meta, because on the opposite end, you have the Gladiators, who played a very close series against Paris Eternal, who, for the most part, are widely considered to be the best 3-3 team, if not top 2, across the entire Overwatch League. And of course, part of that is just due to the fact that they are all pulled from Europe, who, they've been playing tank-heavy compositions. We've already gone through this. Everyone already knows the history of Ninjas in Pajamas. I brought it up last week. Since 2016, it's been heavy tanks, all EU, that's all they do. But I am just looking forward to seeing what Decay is going to bring to the Gladiators, because this had been one of the most sought-after free agents, and he's coming off of a really good contender season when he played on Call to Panthera, and you can talk about the whole fact that, yes, KDP was completely poached. You had a lot of the components go into Shanghai Dragons, but you didn't have the best players go into the Shanghai Dragons. The better of the players from that core of the team went to the LA Gladiators, and now it's just a matter of what is going to happen with the DPS rotation on this team. Is the K going to come in and see playtime over Surefour? Because they're both known for playing Tracer, and the Tracer usually plays Zarya, or is Hydration going to be the one subbed in and out? I honestly don't know, but there's a lot of hype behind Decay, and it's for good reason. And with London kind of on the uptick, it's basically raised the stock of this game for me, and I honestly don't know what to expect from either side. London is looking better, but I still have my doubts, at least on the main tank position. And then on the LA Gladiators, there's been a lot of inconsistencies with keeping Roar up. So this one could really go either way, but I'm expecting this one to be a very close series, so I'm greatly looking forward to this one. And if you're really either team, I think this is definitely a must-win at this point, just because for London, starting 0-2, you have to dig yourself out of that grave. You're basically putting yourself in a position where you have to take probably 3 or the next 4 games just to put yourself into position to make the playoffs. And on the Gladiators side, you're just now starting to get all the pieces on your roster. And who knows, maybe we'll even see the return of Bishu, who has been dealing with an illness as well. So there's a lot of unknowns on a Gladiator side, just because we might see 2 new pieces kind of added to the rotation. And then on the other side, it's just, well, can they kind of shore up some of the issues that they have had on the front line? I cannot wait to find out.
Well said. We can't either. Hurry up and get here.
This is actually a pretty stacked week. I mean, there are a lot of really good matches. I mean, we're gonna see San Francisco versus the Spark, which I think could be a really good match if the Spark have kind of gotten their stuff in order. We'll see Toronto versus New York. So this might be one of New York's first major challenges with how good Toronto has looked. Obviously, the games we covered are ones we're personally looking forward to. But the end of the week, we have the battle of the Korean teams. We have New York versus Seoul, which Seoul has been trending upwards too. So I think that's going to be a phenomenal game to end the week on.
Yeah, almost picked that game. It was hard for me not to, but certainly a great one.
So with that being said, guys, I know we are running a little bit long, so let's go ahead and close out the show for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, one of the best ways to do that is to go leave us a review over on iTunes. It's been a little bit of time since we got our last one, but we are always looking for some insight on how we can make for a better listening experience for you. We also have our Overwatch content hub, Overwatch Recall, where you can find a list of all of the Overwatch content out there, at least in podcast form. So whether it is Overwatch, Overwatch League, Path to Pro, really anything and everything in between that's Overwatch related, that is on our website at owlnshow.com/OWRecall. And then usually every Sunday, I know I posted Weekly Recall today, but Sunday nights, I get the Weekly Recall up, which is a listen of all the content that was released in the past week. So you can just follow the Twitter account or just find it on our website every Sunday, Monday at the very latest. So check that out. But we do have additional ways how you guys can support us. And really, this is one of the most direct ways that you can do that. So, Spider, how can our listeners support us further if they want to do so?
Sure. If you'd like to show some additional support to the network, not just us, but all of our Overwatch shows, you can check out our Patreon at patreon.com/OWL network. We have varying tiers starting at $1 a month and all the way up to 10, and you get various things based on tiers, like we do a monthly AMA. If you go for the $10 tier, we'll do a VOD review. So there's a lot of cool goodies there. So definitely be sure to check that out, because like I said, it doesn't just support us, it supports all of our shows.
And on that note, I do know we're still waiting to hear back from some of our patrons about said VOD review, so please get back to us as soon as you can, because the end of the month is just a couple of days away. And I would hate for you guys not to get some of your perks for this month. But of course, if we don't hear back, we'll get in touch again, get that sorted out. But anyways, we have a number of different ways how you can get a hold of us. So Slambo, why don't you let our listeners know how they can reach us?
I don't know why they'd want to know that, but if you want to toss us an email, you can send that to contact@owlnshow.com. Our website is www.owlnshow.com. Our Twitter is @owlnshow. Our YouTube is youtube.com/c/Overwatch League Network. Our Discord is discord.me/owlnshow. Our Twitch is twitch.tv/OWLN show. And just a reminder, we are a Twitch affiliate. So toss us some support by showing us that subscribe button. Little click there for you. And you guys will get our sweet network emoticon. Just a reminder about our podcasts. We do have Overwatch League Network that airs Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific. Overwatch League by the Numbers is Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, and Heroes Never Die, our variety Overwatch show, airs Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific. Make sure you check out our host streams. Usually they are on Thursdays and Fridays at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. And as Spider said very eloquently, our Patreon is at patreon.com/OWL network. And you can find me over at SlamBoverwatch on Twitter. It's been a fun one.
You can find me. I'll just go ahead and get it done, because we're doing it live.
Pros now.
Bro, yeah. At SpiderGD on Twitter, and Like Slambo said, I usually stream on the channels Fridays. I haven't done it the last couple Fridays because I've been pretty busy, but this Friday I am planning to stream what looks like to be Hero 30. So I'll be on the PTR trying that sucker out.
Nice. And as for myself, you can find me on Twitter at TimelyDrunkCTR. And if I'm live, of course, it's for all of the podcasts that I do here Monday through Wednesday. I will note, though, we are in Overwatch League, 2019 season. I am not planning on streaming on Thursdays while the season is happening. So if there's a time where I can find, like, after the shows on Mondays or maybe before OWL by the numbers on Tuesdays, I might. But I'm not going to say, like, absolutely I'm going to be streaming every week outside of the podcast time. So just keep that in mind. But with that being said, guys, I do want a quick note. Here's Ever Die is actually going to be doing episode 150 in like 2 weeks. So I don't know if we're going to plan anything special, but it's definitely a monumental episode number. So I hope you guys are going to be able to check that one out, which will be at the start of next month. But I appreciate everyone hanging out with us here tonight for another episode of Overwatch League Network. Again, this has been episode number 69. I am your host, Totally Drunk, joined by the Dancing Slambo and Spider, and we hope to see you guys back tomorrow for our Fantasy Overwatch League podcast, OWL by the numbers. Guys, have a good night.